Yeah, my name's Sean Ventura. I joined the Army in early 2004. 2003, got into DEF program, but I grew up in Washington State up by the Canadian border. I was into a lot of hiking, camping. I did search and rescue, a lot of outdoors, things like that. And then after 9/11, just kind of got hit with that patriotic duty feeling that I think a lot of us did at the time. And after the Iraq War, especially, um, I don't know. Part of my personal journey was like I had to lose a lot of weight to join, so it took me a while. I lost about 110 pounds between when I decided to join and getting out of airborne school. Um, but so yeah, I shipped off. I, those early experiences, camping and hiking and all that. I decided I was going through the services. I originally wanted to be a Marine because my grandfather had been in the Marine Corps. And when I talked to him, he says, we run a lot, we do pull-ups. I don't like to run and I can't do pull-ups. So I went next door and the Army said, well, we'll guarantee your job. And, we only run 2 miles at the time. Okay, cool. So they signed me up, let me sign up as a cavalry scout, 19 Delta. I said, cool. So I went through MEPS after I lost all the weight. And at MEPS, they'd give you a red, green, colorblind test. And doctor came up and said, "Hey, you passed. You go to airborne school." And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything about it at the time. Black Hawk Down had come out, and I was like, "Oh, does that involve like helicopters and ropes and stuff?" Uh, so I said, "Sure, it sounds fun. Sign me up." Um, and little did I know, no, it doesn't involve any of that. It's completely different. So, yeah, anyway, long story short, coming out of Fort Knox is where I did my OSET. Was the only one out of my basic training class to end up in the airborne school and then in the 82nd Airborne. When I first got there, it was Alpha 117 CAV. There was only, I think, 70 airborne scouts in the 82nd at the time, and they had just gotten back from deployment. So it was a weird world to transition into. Um, they were under the aviation brigade because they were DivCav, divisional cavalry. Um, so basically, the only people above them was division command. So uh, when I when I got to my unit on the first day, I came in with a bunch of aviation mechanics, and the in briefing from the colonel was two part. He put me off to one side, and he would turn to the mechanics and he would say, welcome to the brigade. We have a bunch of Apaches over here, and we have a bunch of Chinooks, and our aviation assets are important. Blah blah blah, whatever. We're going to be taking care of millions of dollars, this and that. And then he would turn to me, and he would go, "Sorry, I should have asked you before we started. I'll try not to swear. I'll try to keep it peaceful." Well, he would, yeah, you go, you effers, I hate you. And I was like, I just gotta face it. I don't. And he would just dress me down. Then he would turn back to them and tell them more about here's post and here's how things work and this is welcome to aviation brigade. And he would turn to me and he'd go, "You fuckers keep mowing down trees with my Humvees. And you keep breaking my things. And you keep getting girls pregnant and this and that." I was like, what? What am I getting into? I had no idea what I was involved with. And so it was a wild world to jump into. Yeah, airborne cavalry at the time was something else. I was unprepared for it, and also I mentioned earlier, like I didn't join the Marines because I really struggled with pull-ups and I hate running, and that's just a joke of the Army because someone somewhere decided, hey, we're going to send him to a division, and all they do is pull-ups and run. That's it. So daily life at Bragg, I hated it. I hated it. We were running 6, 7 miles a day, and I just, like just pull-ups everywhere you went. It was tough. The training was hard. It was intense. Um, Bragg sucked. It it was a rough world. Everything you did, you were wrong. Um, you could never be right. But, you know, all that, when we finally got overseas, it all made sense. Like, they rush you as hard as possible, because when you get overseas, that stress, you just transition into it without even thinking. And I don't know, it really did make sense. But anyway, before that, it was in 2005. Oh yeah, so anyway, 117 CAV merged with 3505 infantry into the Army's 1st Airborne RISTA. And that was kind of a weird world to be in, because while there was an MTO, there was a plan for it. It also kind of was make it up as you go along. It was like half handpicked and half misfits, and because it was like, we have this core, you can have almost any officer you want, almost any NCO you want. You can send your Joes to any school you want. Get them to Ranger School if you have time. Get them to Sniper School, whatever you want. But also, you don't have enough slots filled, so here's a bunch of guys that are kind of screw-ups. Like, make them work. And it was in a weird way where, I don't know, you were handpicked at the end of the day for whatever reason. But the reason might not be good. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say that. It might not be like you're a stellar, like, Ranger soldier, right? Like, half of you would be, but the other half, you might be, like, super funny. You might be good at stealing things to keep equipment maintained. It was this weird mix. But anyway, they sent us down in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. We deployed down there for relief efforts first. That was kind of a wild eye opener, both like how the military works, but also like, I guess, to how Iraq would work down the line. But just patrolling city streets, except they were American. Like, we went down to keep looters away and basically guard the Superdome, hand out food, rescue people in flooded zones, and a lot of that really did transfer to Iraq. But it was such an eye opener of, like, hey, what you do is important. Like, lives actually matter. I don't. It's weird, because when you join the military when you're young, a lot of times it can be like, this is an adventure. This is something, whatever. I'm having fun. We're doing PT is kind of like sports, whatever. I'm shooting guns. It's be that. And then you get that eye opener of, like, no, this is actually a serious thing. And I guess for me, it was really good that it happened on American soil before we got overseas, because it just did kind of reinforce that you need to pay attention. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know, like, just looking at people, like, I hate saying it, but even in New Orleans, when we meet people on patrol or at night or whatever, and looking, are they armed? Are we going to get shot if you turn around? And it was kind of a wild world to get involved with. But so anyway, yeah, jumping forward, we deployed to Diyala in 2006, in August 2006, and 3rd Brigade kind of got spread out through Iraq, and 573 as a unit got separated from the rest of the brigade. We got sent over to FOB Warhorse. I think it was 4th ID at the time, and we were just supposed to be there for a little while to help them do the transition out, and 1st Cav was going to be coming in, I think, November 2006. So, we deployed with about 330, I think we had about 330 scouts and infantry mixed as a RISTA unit. We just thought it was going to be, Diyala at the time was fairly quiet. Like, Bakuba, 4th ID had been there. They've been doing good work, but also it hadn't really been patrolled heavily since the invasion. The first Battle of Baqubah was in, 2004. Nothing really had been going on since. It wasn't the main focus of combat activities at the time. So we didn't really know what to expect, but also we weren't expecting a lot. But when we got down there, we got further separated out. A portion of the squadron, under our lieutenant colonel, they went out to Bob Caldwell, KMTB, Kurdish Military Training Base. But anyway, they went out to do border interdiction services with Iraqi Army and Iraqi Border Services, and they were out on the eastern side of Diyala. And our troop got, which was Alpha Troop, we went to Warhorse to fill in and do transition. Our CO at the time, Captain Few, he had had a previous deployment with Special Forces. And Captain Few, he's one of the most amazing minds for counterinsurgency that I've ever seen. And I really cannot stress what a pleasure it was serving under that man. He knew intuitively how intelligence gathering drives a larger fight. And he knew from the get-go that we were going to be involved in something a lot bigger than anyone else at the time, than even MNFI, I think, understood. I don't know how he knew, but anyway, so when we got in, we started doing QRF duties with 4th ID. So we were doing a lot of the EOD QRFs. We go through Bakuba, do raids. Our mortar teams were taking out the MIT teams. And then also, Captain Few took us out, plotted us down right in the middle of the Diyala River Valley in this tiny little town called Abu Saida, and decided, I want a patrol base here to create a presence and to start gathering intelligence. And this was August, September 2006. So before the coin doctrine hit, before patrol bases became popular, it was just his thing. Something SF had done, and he says, you know what, this is what we need to do to learn to fight in the valley and the surrounding areas. And so we did it. We went and we found a small house. We rented it from the guy who owned it. And boy, that turned out to be Providence. So Abu Saida, it's a tiny little town that you can't find on a map. And it's divided into two parts. We call them Big Abu Saida, Little Abu Saida. Doesn't matter. But Big Abu Saida is predominantly Shiite. And Little Abu Saida was predominantly Sunni. And when we got there, it was because of ethnic cleansing. So we stepped into the middle of sectarian warfare that we didn't know had been happening. So we go rent this little house, build it up, got, put our little towers on it, do all that stuff. And we have one troop, which is the cavalry troop of scouts is about half the size of an infantry company. So at the same time, while we have like 2 squads back on Bob Warhorse doing EOD and QRF duties, another 2 squads are out at this patrol base way up the valley, manning that and doing patrols out of there and gathering intel. So we're talking like 4 hours of sleep a night. We're just running ragged. And unbeknownst to us, Abu Saida. Sorry, I should try and set this up. It's a little bit before the Battle of Baqubah, but it matters because this whole town in the Diyala River Valley campaign became one of the big shaping operations that led to Baqubah and then after. Because the Diyala River Valley ended up being the hotspot of Al-Qaeda that later would become the caliphate of the Islamic State of Iraq that triggered off Operation Arrowhead River. So we had no fucking idea that this is what we're stepping into. So at the time, we go out, we're doing these patrols, and people come up and start talking to you on patrols. And we're fresh in Iraq, we know nothing about the culture, nothing about what's been going on. 4th ID really just wanted to get out the door and go home. 1st CAV wasn't in yet. No one is watching what we're doing on this side of the river because it's like, hey, you want your little pet project, go play, don't get killed. Fine. And this is from a Joe's perspective. I don't know, maybe Command knew more, but from the ground level, this is what it looks like. So people start coming up to you and telling you things like, hey, just so you know, there's mass graves of my neighbors out in the Bakuba. Hey, the Shiites are coming down with militias. And all those militias, they're all related to Jaish al-Mahdi, Muqtada al-Sadr's militia. All these policemen, they're not police. They're Jaish al-Mahdi. And you're like, oh, okay. It turns out that Big Abu Saida is being funded partially by Iran. So there's Iranian influence because this entire area has been infiltrated by Al-Qaeda and Wahhabis, extreme Sunnis, And the only thing standing in their way of turning this into a major recruiting pipeline and conduit for supplies into Bakuba and then into Baghdad from there is Abu Saida, and not because there's Americans there, but because there's this Sunni warlord there. And this is where we end up as our introduction to Iraq. Like, hello, things are going to get serious. So, yeah, it was called Patrol Base Otis is what we named it. It was named after the first sergeant's nickname from when he was at the RTC. And the first few months out there, it was a blur. We got attacked out there a couple of times, but they weren't serious attacks, and I'm not actually sure they were even targeting us. It was a really weird environment at the time, because again, the sectarian violence was more important than violence against coalition. So you still had to worry about IEDs, but like we had small arms attacks against Otis. But I really think what it was the patrol base was the backdrop of ambushes in the palm groves of like families going out trying to slaughter other families in whatever these towns had going on as Al-Qaeda was trying to maneuver around the other one. We were just still. It was such a weird environment to try and manage. So, you know, we land out there and we start doing the normal things like, hey, let's go open up the girls' school next door. So we try that. And girls' school's in the Sunni part of town. So the next day, you know, day one, all the little girls come back. And it looks great. Because we're in this barren part of town that's been torn up by war for like 3 years. And then all of a sudden, all these little girls come out and they're wearing all their pretty dresses and I don't know what they're called when the children wear them. But anyway, they show up, they go to school, it looks great, it looks like, hey, we're having progress. The very next day, there's a bunch of these Iraqi policemen who are probably actually Sunni or Shia militiamen, and they come out and they decide we're shutting the school down and stealing everything in it. And the school that we opened is literally next door to the patrol base. So I remember I was part of the patrol that goes over to find out what's going on. So it's me, the LT, and like another Joe, maybe two other Joes. We're over there facing off against these militiamen in the school, trying to figure out what's going on. They don't speak English. We don't have an interpreter with us. And it's just a bunch of armed men standing in the school. And then one of the militiamen drops his magazine. And the sound of like, you know, that AK steel on concrete, just that sound alone, I don't know how we didn't just erupt into a firefight right there. Because it was so tense, everything just building, and that immediate snap, and everyone just it came to like gunpoint, just looking at each other. And it was just that it reinforced in your mind of like, Fob Warhorse I don't know how far we were out, 7 to 10 miles from Fob Warhorse, but we're on the east side of the Diyala River. Like, there is no one nearby for reinforcement. Like, we are in the middle of nowhere. We've got a unit transitioning out. No one is coming to help. We don't know what we're involved with, and we can't even speak to people. Like, we're way over our heads right now. So, anyway, we worked out at Otis for about 3 months, and we got some really good intel out there. We started to find a lot of who the bad guys were. Did a lot of sheep engagements, went through a lot of houses, started to beat the palm groves real heavy. And God, that was, you know, it's insane because the palm groves, like, I watched other videos of other people describe them, but it's like that thick jungle. And it gets humid under there. They trap all the humidity from the river. So you still have that August-September heat in Iraq, but now you have humidity on top of it. And you have these deep irrigation canals that are like half the size of a man. And just they've been overgrown orchards. And a lot of the orchards would have wires, like a wire lattice for grapes or other things. But they're hung about head height for an Iraqi, but if you're an American and you're wearing a helmet and you have a NODS mount on your helmet, well, that thing's going to catch every damn wire. So you have to be crouching to walk underneath it while you're wearing all of your armor and everything else, and the heat and humidity are just miserable. And nowhere did I think to pull into a desert Was I going to be beating Bush like that? But anyway, we spent a good 3 months doing it, did a ton of raids, and I remember one of our first big raids out there. Well, like we worked a lot with Iraqi police. We ended up standing up a police station out there that was not linked to militia. That was one of the big keys. Was we were trying to bring stability in, and we would bring them on raids to bring legitimacy, all that stuff. It got weird because we were raiding hundreds and hundreds of houses. I remember, like, on one raid, we were going to a planned raid. One of the Terps looks at someone and goes, "Hey, that guy there, that's who we're getting." So immediately, whatever your plan is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Yeah, this one didn't. We immediately sprint off down an alleyway, follow them around, and then all of a sudden that alleyway turns into clearing an entire block of houses. And it's just going door after door, and I'm point man, kicking in doors, going into rooms. I turn around, and who I thought was my squad following me is one Iraqi policeman who's like maybe 15 years old. And he doesn't speak English. And he's got his AK not on safe, and it's pointed right at my back. And I'm looking at him, and he's like, and that's the thing is, you learn real quick, you can run an entire patrol with Zien and Luzian. There's only two words you need, good and bad, yes and no, that's it. But, it's wild because I look around, and all of a sudden I realize, I don't know where we are. I'm disoriented. This wasn't part of the plan. I have no idea what alleyway we're in or where anyone else is, because we've gone house to house to house just pursuing this guy. Now we have to go out. But now all of a sudden, we don't want to just pop out of a doorway, because of your sudden movement and someone else comes out, like, oh, what's going on over there? So just, a lot of those little moments like that, it's really hair-raising, and it's like, okay, I need to get this policeman in front of me and make him point, and not because I want him to get shot. I've got armor, he doesn't. But also, I don't want him to shoot me in the back on accident or an excitement. And also at the time, I'm E3. It's not like I'm an NCO making decisions about this. Like, I'm a fresh private. It's just, that's how Iraq went when you got into the nitty-gritty of things. As coordinated and as highly trained as you were, things would devolve to the point where, each block would be its own little part of the battle. Each house, each room in a house, each decision was up to each individual at the time. And you really had to have your head in the game, especially at that time, because they were doing rigged houses. So anytime you saw a wire, anytime you saw just any door you went through, it could be an ambush. We're chasing this guy, and looking back on it now, I feel incredibly naive thinking about it, because we were still fresh in country. We had been doing cordon and knocks, but people were letting us in for those. But now here we're just kicking in doors. How did we know that this guy wasn't setting us up to run into a rigged house? Because they were doing that. There was a bunch of guys killed, Ramadi or Baghdad. Mm-hmm. Entire houses where they would kick in a door, and all of a sudden that house was rigged. And we did run into rigged houses later on. But anyway, at this time, so we did all of these raids, all this work, actually kicked Al-Qaeda out of the town. This little town was called Zaghani, and it was right south of Al-Qaeda. Brought in new Mukhtar, chief of police, made a lot of progress in 90 days. Felt really good. And at that time, that's when First CAV transitioned in, and the transition of authority, and I'm not putting blame on anyone, I'm just saying the transition of authority was, hey, we've now taken over the AO, we have another unit, you can go back to your parent unit. And all of a sudden, the patrol base goes away, all of our liaisons go away, we hand over all the intel, here's the people we've been working with, we're out, see ya, peace, and we don't hear anything for a few months. Well, it turns out that they didn't assign anyone out there. They didn't use any of our intel. And shortly after we left, within a week after we left, Al-Qaeda came back, did a suicide bombing, they killed most of the police, rounded up the rest of them, beheaded them in the town square. We took over the town, and then shortly after that, another another team, a MIT team, I don't know, another team from somewhere else. I think they were Marines, so Marine MIT team with government of Iraq troops came back in, and then killed a bunch of people in the town square. Sorry, I'm jumping around all the place. But anyway, Zagania ended up being a main focus for us on this deployment. We would end up returning there in March in 2007. When we did, we found out what had happened after we left. And it just became this escalating sectarian thing where it was like all that work we had done immediately, within days, was wiped out. And then Al-Qaeda came back with a vengeance and then fortified all these towns. But because of what was happening in Bakuba at the same time, no one was paying any attention to it. And so, to tie this into Bakuba, all this stuff is on the east side of the river and it's up the Diyala River Valley. And the Diyala River, it goes up into the Zagros Mountains in Iran. And it is one of the main trading corridors down into Bakuba and then Bakuba into Iraq. Well, under the Baghdad Belts strategy that Al-Qaeda was using, Bakuba was one of the belts to influence Baghdad, and from that, the trade routes and connections up into the rural hinterlands right outside on the east side of the Diyala was where they would have training camps, caches, and all that. And so it would act as this giant filtered basin and then push it all across the Diyala River into Bakuba. And so when all the focus left out of the hinterlands, that became a safe zone where they were able to just build up. And I don't know. That's kind of.
But to jump in here real quick.
Yeah, sorry. I know I'm wandering a lot.
No, you're doing well. You're building the scene. You're telling your experiences. I remember Captain Hugh and and your guys' return in March. But a lot of things what you're referring to is the overall issue which led to the surge of there just wasn't enough boots on the ground. And the strategy of clear and hold, that didn't come into a little later. And yeah, Captain Hugh was a little forward thinking, but the reality was there just wasn't enough soldiers. So you can't clear and hold if you just don't have enough people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
So, oh, keep going. Sorry.
Oh no, it's interesting to me. Like, one of the reasons I like watching these interviews, I spent a lot of time afterwards. After I got out of the Army, I actually got a degree in international conflict affairs, and I did a lot of study on Yala and the Yala campaign and kind of how it all fit. And it became a case study of the Coin Doctrine for a reason. And it really, it's a lot more important strategically than people realize, which is why I really like supporting projects like what you've done, because Yala still, it comes up in strategic discussions, but it's still kind of largely unknown culturally. And part of that is because at the time Baghdad was where most of the reporters were. No one was coming out. No one was reporting on Diyala. No one was reporting on Bakuba, and it went unknown. And it really influences, even to this day, like back in 2014 when ISIS came back, the areas they came back into were these same areas. And they came back and Bakuba got hit hard by ISIS for the same reasons. And it was like all these lessons that were learned or could have been learned, they keep getting repeated. Sorry.
Yeah, and the other big thing that isn't discussed, and I get it, geopolitics and international affairs and all that, but as you alluded to, where the Diyala River runs is Iran and Iran's proxies. So if Al-Qaeda, who, for the most part is more Sunni, and ISIS was more Sunni based, if you want to cut off the supporter of JAM and the supporter of the Shia, especially if you're going towards ethnic cleansing, right there, as you were saying, you have to you have to sever that artery.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was an interesting place to get put into the middle of because any notion of what I had about like Saddam or the Iraq War, the invasion, like Iraq really is a series of different wars. It's not one war. Operation Iraqi Freedom is not one thing. And by 2006, it was something completely different.
Oh
And
yeah.
it really was learning on the ground, like, first of all, what even is this? What are we deployed into? Who are the combatants? What is even going on, and where do I even fit into it?
And if you think about it, just look at our time there. That even changed. So the enemy from March, by time June rolls around, now they've got road guard vest on, and they're the Sunni awakening or whatever. So yeah, it was always a constant change. And my personal opinion, just talking to some individuals who did it, I think units that kept going back to the same place every couple of years probably had it even worse because they trained one way, then you show up again and it changed.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was interesting being out there. I don't know, I don't know if it was because we were a reconnaissance unit. I don't know if it was because of Captain Few or because of Quinn Doctrine, but we ended up spending most of our time on patrol bases or combat outposts, and away from the main fobs, and doing a lot of personal on the ground work and meeting people, meeting villagers, and getting to learn kind of Iraqi culture and how things work at a very intimate level. And that was a really important. It was really important to shaping the battle and learning things because you got to learn like the people in Bakuba, they didn't support Al-Qaeda. Like the town that I was just talking about, Zagania. At the end of our first 90 days there, the people came out and celebrated that we had been there. They had been oppressed by Al-Qaeda. They did not like them. They didn't welcome them, but they were afraid of them. And if they didn't comply with them, they would be beheaded. Like the Diallo River became infamous for bodies just floating down it every day. Um,
There had to be a public execution because how else do you terrorize? What is the point of terrorism? It's
yeah,
not just a buzzword or a word. There was actually you know things to it. There is a emotional attachment or connection when you see someone beheaded in the public square, and there's three more people lined up to be beheaded next.
yeah. No, it was insane. Like during the shaping operations. So skipping forward to spring, I mean, there was a lot in between, all that, but
Well, actually, let's frame it this way. So as you started, as you were telling your story, so you guys were there, you left, March arrives, 5/20th. So an additional infantry battalion shows up. They're helping with part of Bakuba. You got 112 CAV. They've got their parts of Bakuba. And now we start seeing onesie twosie units start showing up. So in comes your company. Here comes Captain Hughes again.
yeah,
And as we arrive in March, the doctrine has changed, as you alluded to. Coin is published. General Petraeus is the man. The word gets out. Get back in the cities. Get out in the population. It's you're not going to win a war from the fob. So combat outpost is the new hotness. Every company starts establishing them. So you guys arrive, you get your orders. So take it from March.
yeah. So March, they decide that Zagania is going to be our base of operations for the rest of the month. But we have to come back into the valley and start anew. So we start with a series of village assaults. We start up at the north, start with a town called Cuba, and the village assaults were we'd go in at night. We'd usually have helicopters land with a force out in the fields to come in and do pressure, and then convoys to come up, block off the roads, and then try and push all the insurgents out towards the river and catch them in the crossfire. Um, and Cuba was kind of our first test where we started to really take casualties. The first phase of it went pretty well. You know, we caught a lot of insurgents off guard. I was in one of the columns of Humvees that came up from the south, and so we would hold the south of the village, and we were waiting while the rest of the infantry cleared off of the air assault missions on that one. And it was part of a 2-week mission. So Kuba was the first part, then Zag, and then we would establish ourselves in Zag. But right next to Kuba was a town called Mukisa. These are small farming villages, too. These are not big villages. And for some reason, the size of a town doesn't mean it can't be a hotspot and it can't be bad. Mm-hmm. You know, Bakuba looks bad. It had, 300,000 people. It was a major city. Urban fighting sucks. Like, it's horrible. No one wants to do it. But also, villages are also not safe either. So, Mukisa ended up being where the leaders of Al-Qaeda had dug themselves in. So even though they were sending fighters in and out of Bakuba and a lot of these other towns, they were all hiding out in bunkers and stuff in Mukisa, which is right next door to all of this. So while we were doing that, remember they sent like suicide bombers over to us. So some of the first casualties we took casualties at Turkey Village, but I don't think the Turkey campaign happened in between, and it's not really related to Kuba. But while we were in this little town called Kuba, the suicide bomber came over on bicycle, just a small vest, and got within, got inside of our command deck, the warlocks, the ECM machines that prevent command deck stuff, and blew himself up, and it killed 4 of our paratroopers. And it was the first time that, I don't know, like I had almost been killed in Turkey. It was really close. I got shot at. Like my first firefight out in Turkey was less than 75 feet away. Fully automatic AKs. They were using the steel core rounds. Like it was really close, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as this, and seeing people that you knew, like that. It was really a game changer. But worse than that, the guys that were hit had been there was a lot of little children that had come out because they'd always come to beg for food and candy and all that. So at the time, I was manning a machine gun on one of the Humvees and providing the cordon. And a couple of the guys that were, they were smoking and joking. And I mean, granted, maybe you shouldn't have been, but also, on a 2-week mission, you can't be 100% on all the time. And so they were out handing, like, chem lights and candy to little kids. And the suicide bomber came up and used the distraction of the little kids and their closeness, because they were right next to the Humvees, and killed them, and he killed a couple children as well. And it was just seeing that someone would willingly target children. Like, I mean, targeting soldiers is one thing. Like, we're there. You can make an argument. We're fighting. We're combatants. But killing the children of your own town, like, it's hard to wrap your mind around. It's really something that messes with you. And I just, that moment, I don't know, that was kind of when the war really sank in and turned real dark for me. I mean, the Turkey assault, Turkey was an assault that happened between November and January, and it was in eastern deserts, and we took down a terrorist camp. It was a major camp, and it was a major assault. But that was different than these village assaults, I don't know, the village assaults they got really personal in a weird way. And I remember after recovering the bodies, immediately this crowd starts to form up to the door. I started to push down. They're like, I just remember seeing all the women, the older women especially, come out. And they're all wearing the black abayas, so they're all dressed head to toe in black. But then you see a bunch of people behind them, and they're like shouting and screaming and gesticulating. And Um, it's like with that kind of adrenaline going, with that situation, a bunch of people just got killed. A couple of kids just got killed. I don't know what's going on. And so I remember, like, a few of us ran up. There's all the confusion. There was also a couple of people that were injured. So they're busy doing a medevac, trying to get these people medevac. We run up to do security at this mob that's gathering, coming down towards the bomb site. And we just keep shouting, like, stop, stop. And I forget what the word is now, but it's like, back up, back up. And they refuse to. Just keep coming forward, step at a time, step at a time. I remember raising my rifle at him, and just that thinking, like, I'm going to have to open fire on this crowd of people because I can't see any weapons, but we just got blown up by a bomb. I don't know if someone has a bomb there. I don't know if they have women in front, but someone behind them has weapons. I don't know what is going on, but they aren't stopping. They aren't listening to us. But also, I don't see any weapons. All I see is, like, women screaming at me. And it's just that having to make that decision, of like, am I about to just gun down a bunch of civilians? Or if I don't, are they going to wipe out myself and the rest of my squad? Because this bomber just killed a couple of kids. I can't say that whoever's with them, maybe he's forcing them. And you know what I mean? Like, it's that position of, like, I'm not going to win either way on this. This isn't good. It's a decision that no one ever wants to have to make. But that's the kind of shit that, like, Diala was. That's what came up in Diala, like, at the end of it, actually, while we were screaming at them and they were getting closer, I remember I was just about to open fire too because they just wouldn't stop. And I felt a hand on my shoulder, just pat me on my shoulder. And I looked up and it was Captain Pugh. And he had come over and he had tears in his eyes. He was shaking his head and he says, "No, Ace. Ace is my nickname. This is Ace." No. And they'd finally brought a Turk over. And what had happened was there were more children that had been wounded in the bombing. And sorry. And they were worried that if, like, a man had brought the kids out unexpectedly after an ambush, that we probably would have just killed him thinking he was attacking us. But because they came out the way they came out, it looked like a threat. And so, like, to this day, I'm glad I didn't open fire, but also, it's like, that's just kind of what Iraq was at the time. Like, you just didn't know.
And didn't know, and there's no true training for that. And what you're talking about is, and I think we're trying to avoid the gruesome details, but that is a gruesome sight where you have just lost the first soldiers from your company, people that you have known for a while now, because it sounds like you were together for the train ups and all that. So you just lost people. Then from there you have a threat that you don't know exactly what could be coming next. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about just how barbaric and brutal Al-Qaeda, the foreign fighters, were on these people. And it's a lot for anyone. I mean, how old were you at the time?
Oh God, I was 26. Yeah, and so I was one of the older ones. And
26 TFC, and here you are holding, the however many people, a small crowd's lives in your hand, and luckily, Captain Hugh, an interpreter, arrive, and you did not pull that trigger, but that is a lot to carry throughout life and to experience.
Yeah, and it's like I don't want to get gruesome with things, but that's one thing that I do I just I do wish people understood is that like the things that soldiers faced in Iraq and especially in Diyala, like they were really serious. Like I don't know. In a lot of ways, like it feels like Iraq got sanitized afterwards, or I don't know. It's
War
it's
gets
kind of
sanitized.
like yeah, it's like so. But also, also one of the things that I've always wanted to stress is that what I saw personally, like that decision, I saw soldiers, I saw Americans, well, coalition, but I mean Americans making more good moral decisions. Yeah, a lot of accidents happened, a lot of bad stuff happened, but that's war. Like that's danger and things. But there were so many good moral decisions that also happened, and I really hate that that gets lost in a lot of the discussion and memories as well.
Especially in, I mean, yes, it's war, but especially in a unconventional war, because as you were talking earlier, there was only one side wearing uniforms. Oh, yep. All right, we had a little lag there, but we're back. But yeah, we'll give it a second so then it's easier for me to edit. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, this, yes, it's technically war, but we're talking about a unconventional war where only one side was wearing a uniform, only one side follows Geneva Convention, and just like what you were just now describing, reliving that event where, you know, you had buddies who, the old doctrinal term was hearts and minds, right? And you probably got different stuff from Captain Hugh, but you can't build trust in the population if you come in as authoritarian. If you come in, hand out those Kim lights, hand out some candy, that's where you get information. That's where you build the trust. That's where, like you were saying, all those great moral things that was the positive that was going on. That's where that happens. And but like I said, only one side was playing by the rules.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to go through those towns, like we don't cover torture chambers, won't cover like mass graves, like depopulated towns. Um, like Al Qaeda, I I really can't stress enough just how disgusting those people were. They didn't care, like what they did to other people, like in the name of, and it's not even religion. It wasn't religion. Some of those towns, the Al Qaeda, they would come in, they would get the young men of the tribes hooked on like drugs or alcohol, and well, I mean, I won't get into other stuff, but I mean, they would break every taboo that the villagers would have, and then they get the young men into these positions of power, and then let them go through the towns, and then use that as a threat. And you go up to like the Mukhtar and be like, hey, you know, you're going to comply with us. You're going to let us do what you want. You're not going to give us resistance. And if you don't, all these guys are going to be roaming the towns. So they come find your daughters or your wife or whatever. Like the problems are going to be way worse, and the Americans are going to go away. It's so Bakuba. The day Bakuba fell, we were doing EOD. Not EOD. We were doing QRF escorts. It was like October 26th. Actually, I have pictures from the day. It was way earlier than what was actually reported, but there was a big push that came in on the west side. It was all the insurgents had come in, and they hit every Iraqi army and Iraqi police checkpoint that they could at the same time. And I remember we drove between each checkpoint trying to see where we could provide help. And at each checkpoint, they were just slaughtered. I remember seeing trucks with just bodies, blood coming out the back, just stacked like firewood. It was insane, and it was all sectarian violence, but it was clearing out um, clearing out the government troops that held legitimacy. It wasn't even about coalition at that time. It was about, the Iraq government doesn't hold any legitimacy. We do. We're here now. And that happened under the transition of these coalition units. And then shortly after that, they had, I'm sure you guys heard the rumors about, like, when Al Qaeda came in and found, like, before the big tribal chiefs. They hosted a big dinner, and then just slaughtered everyone at the dinner. That was how they took over Bakuba, and it happened like 2 months before any of the actual reporting about fighting happened. Like the government of Iraq, the legitimate government of Bakuba, they held out longer up at the government buildings, but like Buriz, was it New Bakuba on the west, Tahrir, like those areas had fallen, were completely infiltrated for months before like the first CAV finally started to get spun up and get positioned out. And it was all underground and festering. And before them, the eastern side had been that safe haven for years. And it was all just brutality that did it. And so that's what everyone that came in was facing. It was like when 520 first came in. I remember, because we remember that. I remember that very clearly. We remember listening to the radio. We were so thankful that we were finally getting other units to come in and help. And then when they hit the IED coming into Bakuba on the very first day, that first striker, it was such a bad omen. It was such a sign of like, this fight is going to be way harder than we thought. It was like, so Patrol Base Otis, we left that, when we left that in November of 2006, they came back, Al-Qaeda came back, they mined it with IEDs in case we did come back to it. And we had no intention to, we kind of forgot about it, but was it in early 2007, there was a Kiowa helicopter was shot down outside of Muqaddiya, and the DART team, Downed Aircraft Recovery Team, was in a Bradley. I think they were from 6-9 CAV. They were from 1st CAV. They came out to rescue them. They hit the mines that had been set for us at Patrol Base Otis, and it killed the Bradley crew. But those had been set for us because we had come in and set up that additional patrol base. So, like, that's the fight. Those were the insurgents. They paid attention. When we came back, anyway, when we came back and started fighting through and reestablished a new patrol base in Zagania that March, I remember real clearly, again, it takes time to develop intel and find out just how deep you are in the fight. And it wasn't until early April, April 7th, I believe it was, we had a log cap that had come in, and they hit a deep buried IED on the way out. And unfortunately, it killed 4 of the 5 people. The one who survived is now, his name is Bobby Henlon. He is a comedian, and he does veteran benefit and raises awareness. So Bobby Henlon, a wonderful story about resilience coming out of that. But he was on that truck, and I remember being like sitting outside the talk at the patrol base, listening in through the door as Captain Hughes giving his update, talking about being surrounded by double buried IED, and how we actually couldn't make a move outside of town now because we moved in, we were inside of it, and they were all command det, so someone did have to sneak up and hook up, but because they were pre-placed, that's all they had to do. Basically, we were living inside of a minefield. And I remember being the joker that I was, and he came out of the talk to take a smoke afterwards, and he looked at me, and he goes, "Oh, you heard all that, didn't you, Ace?" I looked at him, and I gave him this big shit-eating grin, and I copped that quote from Band of Brothers, and I said, "Well, sir, we're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded." And he shot me that look like his eyes could have killed, and he just shook his head and walked off. but yeah, it was. The fight out in the valley was intense like that. Every one of those towns they had prepared, and so it was slow going because if it wasn't deep buried IEDs, it was a house that was ready. So before every door it was kicked, when we were coming into Zag, one of the guys I interviewed, Josh Kinzer, he was one of my NCOs later in the tour. He tells the story great, but they were drawn into a house with another squirter. They squirt to a house, run away. So they go kick in the door of this house. They go inside, and it's got one of those the mats that they always have on the floor. They're going through the house. A team runs upstairs real quick, sets up the 249 or 240 or whatever recovery fire. But as they're clearing the rest of the house, they hear some crunching. Look, man, that wire. They follow it, and it's linked up to a bunch of explosives. But not just explosives. It's linked up to a bunch of chemicals. So at that time, Al-Qaeda was using chlorine and other unknown. We still don't know what they are. But at least two of the guys inhaled the chemicals, and one of them passed out. So Al-Qaeda was experimenting with chemical warfare out there. Later, was it in? They did bomb Abu Sayyaf with chlorine bombs, and it's like, yeah, it was just. It was insane.
You remember it came on when you guys ripped, but I'm pretty sure you're still there. But June, right before Arrowhead Ripper, the chlorine bomb at the front gate of Warhorse.
Yes.
So yes, They were playing with different chemicals, and it wasn't the first time a mysterious chemical was found. But the chlorine bombs started, appearing across the battlefield.
Yeah. No, it was interesting because when people talk about the Iraq War, they talk about Baghdad, they talk about Mosul, they talk about Ramadi and Fallujah. But, like, Bakuba, like, there was, like, Al-Qaeda was experimenting, like, chemical warfare, like, these rigged houses, like, they were doing really legit stuff. Like, the fight there was insane. And when we did a lot of QRF raids into Bakuba, especially early on. And it would feel so weird. It's so surreal because we'd be going doing a targeted raid. We'd be kicking in a door. We'd have someone, zip ties, taking care of your stuff. And then a block away, 2 blocks away, you'd hear a bunch of automatic fire. You listen. Is that incoming? Is that outgoing? Is that echoing? What is that? Is that American? Like someone else? And then you'd hear, you'd just be listening as this automatic fire is moving around you. It's different blocks. And is it coming closer? Are we going to get engaged in someone else's rolling firefight? Is it not? Or is our, if we get in a firefight, is that going to fall into someone else's plans? It was such a weird fight. I wish I had better adjectives to describe it. But
it's almost indescribable, that feeling, especially, and yes, the cliche is we own the night, but still, I mean, nods in a half-lit city and just the unknown, and, as you're bringing up the different areas and just how much action was going on at that time. So we're looking at March, April, May, the beginning of June, that's what, 4 months of just pure violence, chaos. Yes, 520 arrives. Yes, there's more soldiers, but it's still not enough.
Well, right before Arrowhead Ripper kicked off, too, before the actual clearance of Bakuba, Al-Qaeda blew up the Diyala River Bridge. So they severed the east side from the west side. And all of a sudden, all of our log caps between patrol bases, we had to go down through alternate routes and all the way through Bakuba itself. So now, just in order to get reinforcements or water and bullets, you have to go through this entire city that is on the verge of being assaulted. And it's what is that? It was such a wild development. It was such a big win for them. Ultimately, it didn't pay off, but it showed that they were reacting to us. They were paying attention. It wasn't just a walk in the park. They knew. I mean, what was it? Right before June 2006, right before all that kicked off, Zarqawi was killed in less than 6 miles from Warhorse. His hideout was right next to Fob Warhorse. The guy had been within spitting distance watching everything that was going on. So they had been prepping that area for years. It was their quiet little hideout where everyone that had been chased out of Ramadi and other areas flexed over to make Bakuba. And they even declared it as the capital of the new Islamic State. Before ISIS, the proto-ISIS, that was their new caliphate, was Diyala province, with Bakuba as its capital.
Because as what you're just now talking about is the 10 or 30,000 or 40,000 view foot, and as the surge is going through Iraq, yes, they've already been in Bakuba and getting ready, but as the entire surge is going through entire of all of Iraq, just like you were saying, all the insurgents now are moving to the new battle zone, moving to the one place that hasn't been surged, which leads to, like we were just talking about with March through June, of just the rise of sectarian violence, the rise of violence against the coalition, chemical, chlorine bombs, and so on.
When east of the river, in those small towns, the fight got incredibly personal too. Um, Everyone knew who they were. Like we would kick in a door and we'd see messages from Al-Qaeda that had been left. Like in some of the schools, they'd write messages on the chalkboard. They would write um, bounties on officers' heads by name. Um, it was surreal to see that. There was one incident out in a little town called Dura where we were setting up IEDs and then overwatching them. But the local bomb maker, they got into kind of an IED message war where they were setting up fake IEDs for whatever reason. I don't know if it was just to keep us out of the area or to see what we would do, but when they realized they were fake IEDs, they would go mess up the IED and then write our own message on it back to him. I remember one of them was something about apples. It was like, how do you like them apples? And they put an apple on top of like the IED. And so they're having this war of propaganda, literally writing messages to each other on IEDs back and forth between our unit and whoever this bomb maker was. There were Al-Qaeda, God, there was a couple dinners with Al-Qaeda where they were invited with Al-Qaeda linked chieftains to come in and have tea and food. And it's crazy because as much as they hated us and as dastardly as they were, as evil I will absolutely say, under their beliefs, they wouldn't poison you. If they were bringing you, if you were invited into their house, you were protected into the house. It was such a surreal thing. It's like, yeah, you can go, and everyone here knows, and everyone is going to kill each other tomorrow. But today you were invited. And they might just want to hear you, or they might just want to see your face. Who knows why they wanted you here? And you know who they are, but you don't have, because at that time, because of Abu Ghraib and some other issues, it became really difficult to detain people. You had to have a lot of hard evidence. You would have to detain people, take them to Baghdad, and then put them through trials. And there was actually a lot of material evidence that were needed to get them put through trials. And we had one bomb maker we sent to Baghdad, I think, 3 times. And he kept popping up again back in Diyala, putting out more bombs. Because,
And oh, by the way, because they got released, now they get a pocket full of cash and a ride home.
yeah, it's a vacation and money. It was insane. It was playing whack-a-mole with bomb makers. So, yeah, and then just the sheer exhaustion, just clearing town after town, thousands and thousands of raids, just, and like, especially the nighttime, under knots, when you can't see anything, there's no depth perception. Like, you always, you look at the movies, or you always think you're like your cool guy, your hot stuff, I got all these cool toys, but remember one of the late raids we did, it was my roommate from Bragg. We were leading a small section, and this dude was so germophobic. I
don't know how he made it in Iraq then.
He would wear gloves to the bathroom in Bragg, and then he ended up, yeah. And so anyway, we're running through this back alley, and they're like, oh, we take a position. We're just doing security position down an alleyway, and I see this little mound, and we're so fucking wearing all this armor for like 8-10 hours a day, and I'm like, bro, let's just go to that mound and like lay on the mound and use it to prop up and pull security there. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea, but it's not. So you can't see anything at night. So we take a step, immediately both of us sink in up to our waist, and we're like, oh god, what is that? And the smell, and then and I crawl out, and he's like, no, tell me, no, it's not. I'm like, no, man. I'm like, we're trying to be super sneaky, it's trying, like, it didn't matter. everything went out the window. He pulls out a white light and he looks and he is gray up to his pants because, not to get too gruesome, but I mean, we just stepped.
Oh no, I think
it was a cesspool. Someone's yeah, and then we still had another 12 hours of clearance to go, and we're just wearing a cesspool. It was just miserable. And every house that you like, I know, and it's weird to think like you're in the middle of a war. The last thing you should care about is like kicking in a door and tripping and poop into someone's house. But also, there's like a comedy to that too. Like, I don't know. It's some like we got Iraqi augmentees halfway through. In April or May, they gave us a bunch of Iraqis, and most of them didn't speak English. I tried to learn Arabic when I was over, and so at the patrol bases they would do Iraqi guards with like at least one American on each guard position. And so to stay awake at night on guard, I would just try and learn Arabic from the Iraqis that I was pulling guard with. And after a while, they started to treat me like their NCO, which was wild. So I ended up with a squad of Iraqi soldiers that didn't speak English. And at the time, and I've got a thyroid problem that was developing back then, so I started to put on weight. And for whatever reason, the Iraqis loved that I was fat. It was this thing. They'd come up and they'd pat my belly, and they'd be like, "Oh, you pregnant? One baby? 3 babies. 3 babies, very strong." And I was like, fuck you, but also it's kind of funny. But so they would wander off the base off the patrol base every once in a while and come back with like candy and snacks and then want to feed them to me. It was the weirdest thing. Like they'd want to watch me eat candy. I'd be like, thanks, but I also like I want to lose this. I can't eat this. But so we'd be kicking in doors with them, doing raids and stuff, and they would just be looking at me, and they'd be like, "Oh, get behind him. He's big." So, like, the whole idea is my body armor will stop the bullets. It was just this surrealness. You enter that surrealness of being so tired and worn out and miserable that, like, Iraq becomes... It's like you become in a Disney movie. Like, this isn't real life. If I just stay here long enough, I'll wake up. It's like a dream. And I'm, like, at the end of one of our raids in and out of Bakuba, remember, we've been going for more than 8 hours at night. I have all these Iraqis that have been clearing buildings with me, and like at the end of it, they hop in their bongo truck and they're driving their bongo truck back to the temporary patrol base, and we're hiking back and we're sucking, and they pull the truck up next to me, and all the guys in the back start hollering out, and they're like, "Big guy, you tired? Ride with us, ride!" And I remember, I just straightened my back up. And, like, I wanted to die. I was so tired. I was in so much pain. I just straightened my back up, shuffled my armor up, and I looked at them, and I was like, "I'm going to walk it because I'm stronger than you." And they just cheered and then drove off. But they, like, were cheering as I was walking down the way. And I was like, fuck, I should have just got that truck.
But, not to get all deep here, but you probably were one of the few people who treated them nice, tried to learn their language, and yes, it was a kind of a comic relief, and it was kind of a back and forth and a lot of gallows humor. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, you had your fire team of Iraqis and you left an impression on them.
It was an eye-opening experience for me too. Each guard point, we'd have nods and we'd have thermals, and I can't use both. So I'd take the Iraqis and I'd teach them how to use one or the other. And at first, they were a little reluctant, but most of our guys were Shia. They were from Basra or Al-Qut areas. So they're all Shia. And so our big thing was, I would tell them, with this at night, I can see Wahhabis. That was our big thing. We're going to hunt Wahhabi tonight. And they caught on to that and were like, oh, I like that. And so I'd teach them how to use it. And immediately, like, these guys, I realized they were crappy soldiers because they didn't have training and they were demoralized. And they were being treated like crap by their own, command structure. But when they'd come over to my gate, I would teach them how to use the same equipment I had. I would try and teach them anything I could. And like, I remember early on, I taught them about how using the thermals at night, you can see someone smoking. And so, and like, I don't smoke, but at the time I did take up cigars just to stay awake, just that nicotine rush. Someone donated us a box of Swisher Sweets, like a 50-pound box. So I'd just take a pack with me to guard for like 4 or 8 hours, and I would just to stay awake. And I remember, I consider it my success as a teacher, that one night I was just trying to stay awake, and this guy comes up to me and just starts to chide me in Arabic. And then he points at the cigar, and he goes, "Sniper." And I was like, yeah, you're right. And what I taught you sunk in. And I realized they fucking stopped smoking at night because I'd taught them about that, and then I showed them using this, you can see that. And so they just assumed, like, all of a sudden, by treating them as humans and equals in a way, they actually stood up. Like, that's all they needed. And by the end of it, I saw it from actually more of our soldiers, the more we would patrol with them, and when they'd get hit, because Al-Qaeda, after a while, they liked to target them more than us. So on ambushes, they would try and hit the Iraqis. I don't know if they considered them softer targets or what, but it was something about that shared blood. You know, you share blood with people, it changes things. And it really did. I don't know, it was an interesting mix watching how they developed with us at the end of it. Because by the end of 15 months, boy, it's like, I'm not really sure. Like, transitioning back, it's like a feel half Iraqi almost, you know. And like, because talking to them, like, they would whip out a cell phone and show me videos, like music videos or like porn, which was always weird to me because, you know, like a coalition was always like, oh, you can't have any pornography. It's against general orders, this and that. You don't want to offend the locals. But then the Iraqis would come up and be like, oh, mister, I like this. And I'd be like, okay. And I realized, yeah, freaky mister. But the only thing these dudes want to do, they're like young 20-year-old dudes. They just want to go to California and look at girls in bikinis. I was like, wait a minute. We actually can communicate on a certain level of mutual interest. Like, you guys aren't actually interested in killing us in our sleep if we have these common interests, common ground. Like, we're all just young dudes trying to survive. I get it. And I would tell them, like, a lot would tell me, they would be angry. They'd be like, we don't like that Americans want to come and take over Iraq. And I would tell them, I hate Iraq, but also if you stopped blowing each other up, Iraq could be like California. And they would be like, really, you think so? I'm like, yes. If you made your country like California, you could have this. And you could see it in people's eyes, where they would get this realization of like, oh, like, I can be a part of my culture and do something. And I don't know, it was just, I know maybe that didn't translate to the larger culture in any way, but on an individual level, those individual micro person-to-person moments really did matter. It really did, and it opened me up. It changed how I looked at a lot of it. The war and culture and everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's putting the personal, you know, it's not, you're no longer just there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for you, when you left, it was more of a, hey, it's like a PCS. You left your fire team back, and you hope that training in the next unit, and then also just they're standing up the Iraqi army, that they were going to be successful and make their nation what they wanted to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of veterans that, especially with those 15-month tours, I think a lot of us felt that kind of investment in one way or another. Just
gotta finish the fight.
Yeah, it's another part that just transitioning away. Like, I listened to one interview where the guy was talking about how, you know, they came back to Lewis and then within 4 hours were out at a concert, and just, it feels, you know, it's like something is unfinished. You know, it's like you do feel a little bit of investment in all this blood, sweat, and tears that you've put in, and then also what becomes of the people. You know, like all the little kids, they would come out and wave to us, or like bring us things, or come say hello in the markets when we, you know, at the patrol bases. Like, the people would come up to us because they were so thankful to have the stability and to have Al-Qaeda not around us. But I mean, it was tough. Like, out out there, those small towns like our out in Zagania, our patrol base, we always every moment we had that we weren't patrolling, we were reinforcing it. And then we also, after the April 7th bombing, we would sit out at checkpoints, 24/7 in vehicles, just looking for VBIDs or snipers or anyone coming into on the main routes just to keep them open. But unfortunately, like nearby our sister patrol base in Asada, that was always supposed to be a temporary patrol base, and it wasn't reinforced quite as well, and they weren't sure when they were going to get pulled out. And Al-Qaeda, when they wanted to strike back, they chose Asada because it wasn't as well defended, and so they hit it. I think it was April 23rd in 2007, and they hit it with a couple of suicide dump trucks, and they killed nine paratroopers and wounded 20. It was the largest loss of life for the 82nd Airborne since Vietnam. It was a historic attack. And it was just I don't know. It's like the fight out there. They were a lot more savvy than they looked. They were watching and planning. They were picking moments of when to use what they had, and they were effective. I know 520 got hit hard. First CAV, when they first rolled in, they took like 26 casualties within a month. Like they got rolled up. It's something, I don't know. It's not just farmers. It's not just.
Well, these weren't the farmers like you're saying. This is the foreign fighters. This is the people like the camp you rated your unit rated earlier in the story. These are the dedicated fighters. This wasn't the farmer who got paid $500 to lob a couple mortar rounds at a base or just to go do something. But these were the dedicated people from, you could probably argue throughout the world or throughout certain areas of the world that came in and were there to fight Americans and kill Americans and to help establish the new Islamic State and everything else. So, yeah, I mean, the situation was stacked against everybody there. And as you brought up, April, the suicide dump trucks and just all this, escalating violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's even with all the units that came in for Arrowhead River, I still think that more troops probably would have been needed. Like the Battle of Baqubah, like it's kind of a miracle what was accomplished with the troops that were there, and that's just something I really, really like to stress when I talk about Bakuba and Diyala just in general. Like even with the surge, there should have been more troops. It really was that kind of fight everywhere. You saw like our unit as a reconnaissance unit, as a RISTA, and especially as an airborne RISTA. We were a very small unit. We're designed to provide intelligence for a brigade that was supposed to be behind enemy lines for a very specific reason, and then we're just detached for a temporary mission that escalated into a bigger mission. And so we ended up holding an AO that was 3 times the size of what an infantry battalion should have. It's just running on fumes, just with nothing. I think by the end we took like 110 wounded and 22 killed out of initial like 330 that deployed. A lot of our wounded and killed were truck drivers and mechanics because everyone got pressed into convoys, they were out supporting us in Humvees or, like at Turkey Village, they were part of the main assaults. Like we had infantry, we had scouts, we had everyone doing everything. The fight was complex and mixed, and everyone was giving everything. It was I don't know, it was a really heroic effort. It's just it was a really unique time, and
Yeah, it was, and like you're saying, it was a cumulative effort to make the mission successful. So kind of picking things back up on the timeline here. So did you have anything else major before Arrowhead Ripper, or are we at Arrowhead Ripper?
Uh,
You mentioned April 7th.
yeah, April. We yeah, because we pushed back. March was when we put up those patrol bases, and we started doing a lot of intel collection, and that was to set up, and shaping operations for Arrowhead Ripper. So we started doing a lot of raids, but also like a lot of engagements with sheiks and things like that. And a lot of reconnaissance. So both sides of the river, we were looking for routes in and out. We had a couple missions where we actually took a little boat across to go and do raids against people. So we were doing a lot of targeted raids to try and capture Al-Qaeda heads. It was interesting because we got there was a lot of missions that if special forces couldn't get to it or didn't think it'd be worth the time, then they would come down and give it to us to go and try and do. So we got into a lot of really diverse stuff. We'd be like, hey, we've got this guy. We think he's here. It's not like certain enough for us to get. We don't want to waste our time on it, but why don't you try it? So we would do a lot of that stuff, and that took us all over both sides and in and out of Bakuba. I know, I don't know. We were just running 24/7. Our Bravo and Charlie troops did some serious air assault stuff as well, where unfortunately I wasn't on those, but yeah, Alpha troop, the troop that I was in, ended up holding Zag and being more oriented towards intelligence collections. So we were doing just a lot of those kind of Mukhtar engagements, or like meetings, the Al-Qaeda meetings, things like that. And so Palm Grove clearances. So that's why I was trying to learn all the Arabic that I could, just to be able to listen in or to talk to people in the shops or when we were doing raids. So that was mostly what we did up until Arrowhead Ripper started. And then we got pulled over to provide a screen line on the east side of the river as most of the clearance happened. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like Arrowhead Ripper, once the actual assaults started happening on the west side, it was almost a little bit anticlimactic for us because all the Dial River stuff kind of got put aside and we just came out. It was kind of fun because we just take over houses and just watch across the river as all the other stuff was going on. But just to be waiting for people to squirt out and then try and capture them as they would hit the river or try and cross. So yeah, our area up and through June, that's mostly what we did. And then after June, we got tasked to go back out and start doing more of the village assaults to try and keep them from coming back. So we did like Massacre? I've been pronouncing that one, I think, right for 20 years. But we had a bunch of operations where we just go clear village after village after village, just raid after raid after it. But that was mostly the follow-on after Ripper, just to keep the insurgents from moving back. And then we pushed out into Makisa itself and finally established a patrol base out there. And that's when we started to find a lot of like the serious Al-Qaeda kind of governance. They're judicial. They had courtrooms, like an entire leadership section, bunkers, their torture chambers, and a lot of that stuff out there. Some of the graves and things that was all hidden out in the Makisa area.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to kind of summarize there. So Arrowhead Ripper, another, Striker Brigade, but another BCT shows up, or SBCT shows up. The AO's flooded. Operations continue into, I think it's about August 19th when, Arrowhead Ripper ends. And then from there, your unit becomes start raiding the villages to either stop Al-Qaeda from moving back or to find where the squirters may have ran off to. So from there, the conditions are set for a Bakuba to finally be cleared and held by the Iraqis.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. Like communications was a little bit difficult. there's a lot that happened behind the scenes where for a while we had been told that we were tasked to lead an assault onto the east during Arrowhead Ripper instead of doing screen lines. We were supposed to go in ahead of the striker clearances on the west, and ahead of some of the preparatory artillery and other things. I'm not sure who had made that decision. I don't think that was a 520 decision, but they'd wanted to use the squadron to push in early, to take out some what they thought were in place, heavy emplacements. But the way it was set up looked like we'd just be running into pre-placed guns and IEDs. It looked like it was just going to tear the squadron apart. But for a couple of weeks before that happened, that's what we thought we were facing. And just life of the patrol base just kind of it ground into, I don't know, just, I don't want to say hopelessness, that's not the right word, but it was like a malaise. It was like you put one foot in front of the other. You just stop thinking about things. Your friends would just, they'd come by your bunk and they would sit and just kind of sigh, and you just sit quiet. Or, I remember my medic one day sat on the bunk and he goes, I thought maybe one day I'd want to have kids. And then would just walk off. And it was kind of like that. It was just, we'd already been through so much at that point, and it just felt like this was going to be too much. It was the PTSD by that point also was really getting there. You could tell people were just, it was not the mental state was kind of declining by the time we hit there. And so when things changed and we got the orders to just do screenline, it was unbelievable. It was tough to say because on the one hand, I don't know, I don't want to say we were all spoiling for a fight, but we kind of were. There was kind of that feeling of with all the dings we've taken, we want to keep giving back, but also at the same time, we want to do it in a smart way. And
if you got two brigades that are about to start swinging, who wants to be the guy on the sidelines of, oh yeah, I was there, but I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, for the PTSD, the mental health, the cumulative trauma, the cumulative exhaustion that 15 months in theater does to you, and not just 15 months in theater, the 15 months of casualties, whether they're the Iraqi citizens, coalition forces, the Iraqi army. I mean, it takes its toll.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I gave first aid to a baby. It just, there's things that just, it sticks with you and makes you reevaluate life. And I don't know, I was quiet for a long time, but then I realized, for me, I am verbal. I've always been a verbal person. And that's, like I was saying before we started recording, one of the reasons why I've decided to start talking more is because, for me, verbalizing these things really does help me, but I know it helps other people. It feels like your story is being told, and that is such an important thing. A lot of Iraq veterans in the first place, especially Bakuba veterans, I've heard, they question what was the point? What was it for? Because we all saw the small part of it. When I was in, I said, I've studied Bakuba in kind of the larger picture for a long time, just to make it fit, make that story narrative fit. And now I understand my point better, and it definitely helps my mental health. But a lot of people that I've met don't, and if they don't have that, they still wonder, was it worth it? Did it matter? Where is my story? How does my story fit to it?
And I think that's a great segue into how Bakuba's affected the rest of your life, but also tell everybody about what you're working on. What unofficial or official role you've taken up within your organization.
Yeah, last year at the unit deactivation, I got asked to do interviews with unit members, and I've kind of tried to roll that into just doing a 573 unit history. just to preserve all of our history. But I've been really interested in expanding that into more of a Bakuba and Diala, like that surge time frame. So I've been collecting interviews as well, and I'm working on writing stuff. I'm collecting all my blogs and letters and photos to start collating things more. But yeah, I've just gotten really interested in veteran preserving history, which is kind of how I ended up in touch with you guys. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the middle of a move, so I've got to build a new studio. Hopefully, we'll be doing more of that later.
Yeah, well, that's a great plug. It's definitely something I hope that we'll be able to work together more on, because you know you bring in that 573 perspective and the research and all the work you've been working on, and that's the big part of the Debrief project is history and healing. That it's been proven through research and through mental health journals, but talking is powerful. So for veterans to share their history, talking especially with another veteran, especially with someone that was there in Bakuba. You know, we could all talk about various parts of Bakuba, but you know, but having that joint connection, sharing, it's very freeing. It's very healing. It's very therapeutic. So that's where all this comes together.
Yeah, I've always felt like when I run into people that were in Bakuba or Diala at that time over the years, there's always this feeling of I don't know, kind of familiarity. It feels good. It's like there's so few people that can understand that experience in the world that when I do come across one that had that kind of shared experience, even if it's not directly, it's still like you know the same place where I was at the same time and what it was like. And that has been very important in my life.
Yeah, very true. I mean, yeah, very true. So, hey, so the way I like to try to wrap these things up is just giving the floor to you. If there's anything that you may have forgot about, or you'd like to, but what's your closing? What do you want people to really take away from this debrief?
That's a good question because as much as I talk, I honestly hadn't hadn't thought about that. I think I would want people to know that it all was worth it. Not just the veterans who were there, but the people that question why we were in Iraq the first time. I wasn't there for the invasion. I don't comment on the invasion. I don't like to comment on the politics of it. When I got there, there was a sectarian civil war going on, and when I left, it was a lot better. You know, like I know what we did in the middle of it was, and the people, the actors that were involved, we did help bring stability. And maybe it wasn't forever, but that's life. Nothing is going to be stable forever. You know? Look at where our own country is right now. You do the best you can in the moment you can to leave an impact. And I hope people realize on all sides of this topic that yeah, you did leave an impact.